Welcome to San Mateo County Today. Conversations with government leaders throughout San Mateo County. Here's your host, Mark Simon.
Welcome to San Mateo County Today. I'm Mark Simon, filling in for Marshall Wilson. Our guest today is Melissa Stevenson Diaz, fairly recently named city manager of the city of Redwood City. How recently is recently? How long have you been city manager of Redwood City?
I started in October, so just since last fall.
Give us a little bit of your background. Where were you before? What other cities have you worked for before?
Sure. So I was fortunate to start in city government right out of college, and started first for the city of Morgan Hill in Santa Clara County, and then worked for the city of Fremont, and so over Alameda County, and then the last 5 years I've been in the city of Mountain View. So I've worked kind of always in the city manager's office, but also having other departments report to me, and my last two positions have been as assistant city manager.
Is it a sort of a logical progression? Was this a career goal for you to become a city manager?
Yeah.
And so what other jobs did you have at other assistant city manager? Mm-hmm. What kind of things were you learning in that process?
So it's a very traditional path that I happen to be on. So starting out as an analyst, sort of helping look at policy and provide the background information that feeds into what you share with council to help them make decisions. And over the years, I've had responsibility for human resources and IT, always lots of budget involvement. For a short time, I got to be in charge of our Parks and Recreation function in Morgan Hill, kind of in a crisis situation, which was really interesting. I've had a lot of focus really on the internal functions in order to support really well the operating functions for the city. So, but good exposure around all of the different opportunities for a city.
Yeah, we were talking off the air about what your college degree is in. What was it again?
So it's the highly sought after medieval European history degree, yes.
And yet you went to work for a city right out of college. So where'd you go to school?
So I went to Mills College in Oakland. So I'm a military kid, but I came to the Bay Area for college.
So how did you end up in city government?
So I'm very fortunate that I had professors at the time who reached out to cities around the area and said, we have great students for interns. And I was extra fortunate then that a city manager at the time was willing to hire me as an intern, even though I did not know anything about local government. I was interested in learning. And one of the really great things about a small town is you can work on a lot of different kinds of programs and activities and just be exposed to all the different realms that the city is in. So it didn't take long for me to fall in love with that. I did go back to school and get a master's in public administration to be a little more useful to my employers.
Yeah. So you weren't intent on going into city government, but once you got into it, you fell in love with it. What is it about being in city government that's so appealing to you?
What I found is I just really appreciate that local government touches people. You know, we provide the services and the infrastructure that support our daily lives. And so if we're doing a good job, you don't notice that you have clean water that's reliably there, that you're able to traverse the streets pretty readily, that you're in a fairly safe environment, that you have quality parks and other amenities. I mean, those are all good hallmarks, I think, of a quality of life that we aspire to in our country. And so it's exciting to be part of the level of government that is able to deliver that. And it's also interesting because it's the opportunity where residents can actually influence what happens in their communities. And so tons of complex issues that we're working through, and this is where we can, as public servants, work with the community to find better solutions and approaches.
That government governs best that is closest to the people.
I think so.
Yeah. So a lot of people work for cities and don't aspire to become a city manager. Why was that interesting to you? What was it about that level of leadership that appealed to you?
Well, I think really it's just that it's the opportunity to have more opportunity to shape what happens for a city council and for an organization, and so it's the leadership role. And over time, as you work at different levels, you try and figure out, is this something I could do? Could I be helpful to an elected official or body? And is this something I'd like to do? And share my experience and work with other staff in order to support the city council and the community. So it is something I've been wanting to do, and this was the right time and I think just the right place.
Why Redwood City? Why would you want to do it there?
Redwood City is a community I've really admired for a while. I've lived, like I said, in the Bay Area for over 20 years. I've watched some of the changes from a little bit of distance, but with the interest of from a professional standpoint of what are the levers a city has to shape the investment that happens in their community. I would say I grew up in a military family, and we didn't really have a ton of appreciation as I was growing up for kind of the role of the private sector and what it takes for companies to decide to locate and invest and to have a healthy and robust economy, and what that means then for a community. And certainly over the last 20 years in the Bay Area, as we've seen these economic cycles, I've been on the recipient end of what it means to have job losses and loss in housing values. So I've gained a really profound appreciation for how much those cycles affect us, and how limited actually our tools are at the local level to really shape those economic cycles.
I mean, it's largely land use.
It is.
And you've come to Redwood City at a time of tremendous change, some of which is making people a little uncomfortable, but change always does. And you sort of plopped down in the middle of it, really, because most of it was set in motion before you came here. Describe what's going on in Redwood City, how the community is changing, and what some of the growing pains are.
So it's very much in the community dialogue right now, but I think one of the impressive parts about the change that's happened in Redwood City is it has been a thoughtful and intentional approach of using the tools the city does have to try to provide more amenities for residents. The pace at which that has happened, I think, has struck everyone.
How would you define an amenity? Because some of the downtown growth, some people would describe as a positive amenity, some people would not describe it that way.
Right. So having a thriving restaurant district. Not everyone will go to every restaurant, but having a wide variety of places to eat or have a cocktail, for many people, that's something that's desirable. Having opportunities for entertainment downtown, live and movie theater, those are often seen as amenities. Courthouse Square is amazing, and the fact that that is so well used and is so positively used for the community for events that attract people all different backgrounds and all different spending levels, to be honest, is really a terrific aspect of our downtown and something I admire.
We're going to take a quick break. Don't go away, and you stick around too.
Okay.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to San Mateo County Today. I'm Mark Simon, filling in for Marshall Wilson, and this is Melissa Stevenson Diaz, the city manager of Redwood City. We were talking about the changes taking place in your town. There are people who think too much has happened too fast. Do you have a view on that, or is that done? What's your view on that?
So my view on that is if people are feeling that way, it's something that we should talk about. And so one of the focus areas for the council this spring really is to provide more opportunities for public dialogue about the impacts of change and how do we as a community decide together how best to move forward. So over the next several months, there's going to be several opportunities through city council meetings and probably some other forums as well for residents to provide input and to help shape the next steps.
If you'd asked people 15 years ago to describe Redwood City, downtown especially, would have been quiet, would have been struggling. Everybody uses the Deadwood City. Most of the council members I know hate that expression. But it wasn't a happening place. It wasn't a dynamic place. It didn't have businesses. I mean, you go through on a Friday night now, and all of the restaurants are filled with people who are clearly from the tech industry. They're in their 20s and 30s. Characterize Redwood City now. How would you describe it? You meet somebody who's not from here and you say, here's what my downtown is like.
Well, I think Redwood City is remarkably diverse, and the downtown is a neighborhood, but not the only neighborhood. And the neighborhoods vary a lot in Redwood City, I think is how I would describe it. And so I think one of the really impressive attributes about Redwood City is we have some neighborhoods that are somewhat unchanged, and we have some very long-term residents who appreciate the history, who have chosen to live here, to raise families here. Some of their children have come back and been part of that, and that's a part of the richness of this community. But it's also attractive to newer people, newer to the area maybe, younger, starting their careers and starting their families. And so we're finding, as we kind of see these generations come up, I look at college age and millennial age kids in my family, and they are not making the same choices I did in how to live or sort of what is really appealing to them for their daily life. And we see that play out here. So I have a niece who's in her mid-20s, and she's changed jobs, probably 3 times, less than 2 years, at a stint. And she's, worked in major cities. She's not worked in suburbs or smaller communities. She doesn't have a car. Currently, she's, living by Airbnb. It's radically different than how I was raised, or how I chose kind of to spend my 20s. But it's totally working for her, and she's thriving, and she's happy, and she's employed and contributing, and so there's a lot of, I think, better understanding that could happen, I'm hoping, in our community about the fact that, yes, some people are making different choices than we did, but they're still contributing in a valuable part of our community.
There's an inherent tension.
There is.
How do you manage that?
So I think we manage that really just by providing places for open and respectful dialogue. And ideally, just giving people the opportunity to get to know somebody who's a little different than they are and finding common ground. I think there's far more common about what is drawing people to Redwood City than really what keeps us apart. But it can be easy in times of stress to focus less on what's common and more on what's different. And frankly, I just think the whole region is really challenged right now. It's not just in our borders, but the minute you leave Redwood City, you're still faced with terrible traffic and taking much longer than you'd ever hoped, and you're still challenged to find affordable housing. So there's no relief outside our borders. It's the same forces that are affecting the whole area.
So the inference of that is it's not necessarily fair to expect you to solve all those problems either.
Well, yes, I'd appreciate that.
But it's challenging is an interesting choice of words, because I think that's what a lot of people are feeling. That is, it's more challenging to live here than it used to be, and that's a change that people find uncomfortable.
And I will just say, having recently been in Mountain View or just even, other places in the Bay Area, residents in all of those places are feeling the same thing. So I don't mean to in any way undercut how people are feeling, because it's real. It's real all over, though. It's, in my view, not necessarily fully unique to Redwood City. And I'm not yet convinced it's only due to the growth in the downtown. There's population growth that's happening among people who aren't living downtown.
Yeah. I don't mean to fixate on downtown, but Redwood City went all in terms of making its downtown a place of restaurants, of entertainment, and of office space and residences. A lot of the things a lot of cities talk about doing, but don't commit to doing it in quite the degree that Redwood City has. Now, some of that is because a whole bunch of projects were planned over a long period of time. They got backed up because of the economic downturn, and then all sort of arrived at once. But is there more of that we can expect in Redwood City? Are we going to see more of that kind of stuff taking place?
Not nearly on the scale and pace, I think, that has happened to date or in the most recent past. We're getting pretty close to the maximum allowable in office development and housing, so in the downtown. So this is the perfect time to really, take a look at, have we achieved what we expected to in the downtown plan? Has it happened in the way we would like to? And what would we like, most importantly, what would we like going forward? What makes sense for directing investment and employment?
You keep referencing other neighborhoods in the city that are also undergoing changes. They're clearly not as dramatically visible as what's going on in downtown. So give me an idea of how some other neighborhoods are changing.
Well, some of the things that we're hearing is, for the folks who are in our community who are more economically stressed, they are really struggling with the terrible lack of affordable housing. And so you're seeing in some neighborhoods more families living together in space than they or anybody would like to be the case. And in some cases, you're finding people realize they can't afford to live here no matter how many people are in the household. And so the neighborhood's changing because some folks simply, can't afford to live in a place that they have lived. So there is change happening.
How many new housing units have been built in Redwood City or are in the pipeline due to be built within the recent past and near future?
That's a good test for a new city manager. I'm sorry I'm not passing it. I don't have it.
It's in the hundreds, though, right? I mean, is it in the thousands?
I don't think it's in thousands. I think it's in the hundreds. We will be talking in the near future with the council and kind of providing a more comprehensive picture about what's happened in the recent past. So that information will be available soon.
The reason I asked the question is because is perceived by a lot of people as one of the ways you have to tackle this problem of how much it costs for some people to live here is you have to build more housing that's affordable, that's walkable, that doesn't necessarily require the car.
Right.
And Redwood City's going all in on that. But you're not going to solve the whole problem, are you?
Right, right. And there's limitations in terms of how much we can kind of put on the plate of new development because there are historic, decades-long lack of investment in housing or in transportation systems. So again, we as a region are really still struggling with development that happened not in the last 5 years, but in the last 50 years. So we have a lot of catch-up to do in the whole area, and only, by doing some of that catch-up or rethinking it, such as, not planning on everyone having a car per person, and single-family homes. That's really the only way to accommodate people who are here now.
We're going to take another break. Stick around, we'll be right back. Welcome back to San Mateo County Today. I'm Mark Simon, filling in for Marshall Wilson. And over here we have Melissa Stevenson Diaz, City Manager of Redwood City, for 3 months plus. So you've survived at least the first probation period.
So far.
Yeah. The city recently addressed El Camino. And again, that's a place where a lot of people think if we're going to do something about housing stock, the opportunities for height and density are best at El Camino. Give us an idea of what's going on in Redwood City and its El Camino planning.
Sure. So actually what the council just did this week was set forward a process for looking further at El Camino. And one of the things that I think is a real focus for the city council right now and a real positive for the community is that we're really trying to make sure we have a robust process for people to be involved. So, we have some existing plans in terms of how dense development can be along that corridor. We're not planning or recommending changes to that at this point, but we are really seeking input from the community about, how should the street best be configured? Do we prioritize vehicle traffic? Do we make more accommodations for pedestrians and bicycles? Do we, really try to provide incentives for greater use of retail or greater use of housing? So there'll be a probably 12 to 18 month process where residents can be involved and help the council make those decisions.
So there really isn't a vision yet for what El Camino should be. That's the process you're undertaking.
Right. That's right.
But it is a place where you can do things that you can't do somewhere else, certainly in a residential neighborhood. So the opportunities there are distinct.
But they're also related, and great points were made recently just about the fact, of course, that is a corridor that connects, all through the area, and so we have to be mindful there too of what happens when people, cross over to San Carlos or cross south. So we do have to be doing that work in relationship with our neighboring communities.
Is any of this going to really affect the cost of housing in this area, or is there a number out there where you could build enough? I find that hard to believe, I would think.
I'm not sure that there is a number, that there's enough. Certainly the Association of Bay Area Governments has goals for all of our communities to build more housing in order to handle our current and projected population. It is often challenging for communities to get anywhere close to those goals because it requires either more dense housing than they've been used to or repurposing land in a way that just has not always been popular, and then in some years it's just not economically feasible. So it's a major challenge.
You do see some communities where they don't want high-rise, high-density housing on El Camino. Do you think Redwood City is likely to be a place where that's going to be part of the vision?
It's a little early for me to tell, just because of my tenure at this point.
Yeah. I know before this airs, you're going to have some discussions about Farm Hill Boulevard. You got a lot of attention for the changes you tried to make there to traffic calming is one of those euphemisms that always makes me crazy because there's really nothing calming about traffic. But without telling us what the council you think is going to decide, since we probably don't really know, what's the assessment at this point of what's been done on Farm Hill and how it's working?
So I think
I'm sorry. We should tell our audience, in case they don't know, it was a 4-lane street that was turned into 2 lanes of through traffic and a center lane of turning lanes, largely to ease the concerns that the residents there had about the amount of speeding traffic that was taking place, how difficult it was for them to get out of their homes, how dangerous it was sometimes for them to get out of their homes. I'm sorry.
No, thank you. I really appreciate the the overview with that. This is a challenge that happens again in kind of many communities, and really it's really just about the balance of how do we make our roads safer. And so my understanding is historically that's a road where there have been a lot of accidents, and there have been injuries, and there have been deaths. And so the council has taken the pilot program as an opportunity to study essentially, could we live with a different balance of speed and flowing of traffic in order to make things safer for people, either entering the roadway or walking or biking. So we've been doing a lot of data analysis and trying to assess kind of what are the experiences people are having just with the volume of traffic or traffic delays. What are the safety issues? It's certainly a place where we have some data. It's often not as precise as everyone would like, and the data is often or not always really abundantly clear. So, for example, impacts on other neighboring streets. We're finding in some cases volume is going up, but not necessarily clear that we can attribute that to Farm Hills changes. So sometimes changes like this actually need a longer period of time to assess because we all change our habits to based on the current situation, and it may just take some time for people to get used to different patterns for us to really know, is this working or is this really just not a good approach? Well,
the initial hope was that it was going to be a year-long pilot, and you're assessing it sooner than you would have planned to, just because the public kind of demanded that.
So this is about the 6-month point.
Yeah. Without predicting the outcome, what is the staff's sense of this plan? Has it generally been regarded as something that's working pretty much the way it was intended to?
I think our sense is first, we didn't do a great job with the rollout. So I think we've been pretty upfront about saying this happened later in the summer and didn't really start at an ideal time. So that's clearly something we wish we would have done differently. We find always with changes to road patterns, it does take time for people to adjust. We find often that people feel very strongly about these issues. There's very high level of opinion about this, and at the end of the day, I think we're hearing pretty evenly mixed responses in terms of people who feel it's a better approach and people who don't. And so, that's a tough trade-off and a tough balancing act to come forward with. And I think fundamentally the top line message is when you have a really high proportion of people that are speeding in places they shouldn't be, it's really a traffic safety issue, and how much do we value enhancing safety.
Melissa Stevenson Diaz, City Manager of Redwood City, thank you for being on San Mateo County today. And thank you for watching us. We'll see you next time.